here's a little bit of Infertility Feelings podcast trivia. The first episodes were recorded on video. Did you know that?
The first 10 episodes.
The first 10 episodes are filmed, and you can watch them. And then we took a long 60-episode hiatus
Who does that?
of filming. But guess what? Today, we're back, baby. We're filming the Infertility Feelings podcast, and you are listening/watching the first new filmed episode.
Yes. And we haven't done this in a really long time. So hi to the 2 people that are going to watch this video. We love you dearly.
No way. This thing is blowing up.
We did have some people that would ask to bring it back. I had like 1 or 2 that would be like, film your podcast
like,
again.
I think like your mom, my mom. No.
Our aunt, my sister, and that was it.
I like filmed podcasts because then there's so much more content that you can dive into. The idea is that we would use this space, and we're going to use this space to help communicate all of the feelings of infertility. We have lined up on the podcast some amazing psychologists to talk about the psychology of infertility.
Need to book them first, but yes.
No, I'm serious. I don't even want to give it away, but we have some amazing guests coming who are going to talk about the real deal research behind how infertility affects our relationships, how it affects our minds, how it affects our psychology. We're going to give you some serious tools to deal with and process the emotions, as well as many conversations with Jesse and I about all the feelings that go along with infertility. Because there's a couple feelings that people feel.
Just a few.
Yeah, just a few.
Yeah, light thoughts about yourself and,
So there's good news and there's bad news, right? The good news is that we're filming and that we have some amazing psychologists lined up. But there's also bad news, Jesse.
And the bad news is that our Instagram got hacked and deleted.
Oh.
It was last Thursday, which if you're listening to this at Christmas, you will not know what that means. But it was 7 days ago, and it was a very low moment. Because if I can paint the picture, we literally had led one of probably the top 5 process groups that we've ever led.
It was great. It was so
great.
great.
The vulnerability was insane. Someone shared something because someone else shared something. It was just like really great. And we were feeling so good. And we were actually going to go on vacation right afterwards.
Yeah.
So we were feeling so good. Like, that was such a good progress group. And then literally you opened up your phone and realized that we no longer had an Instagram.
Yep.
And
that was the weirdest moment ever. It was like, let me just check something. Oh, wait, that's weird. I got logged out. Oh, wait, that's weird. The account is gone.
And what's so ironic is on this vacation that we were going to have, we were going to think a lot about gratefulness and how grateful we were for our lives and
all the things that have happened at Uniquely Knitted.
All the things that happened at Uniquely Knitted. And it was just like, can you still be grateful with your Instagram being deleted?
Also, who hacks an Instagram and then deletes it?
Or like, who hacks a nonprofit Instagram? You're not even it for yourself. If someone isn't it for themselves, that's great. That's fine. But it's like, we're just not.
It literally says on the top of our profile, infertility, mental health. Who, I know it's probably just a robot who did this, but still, anyone who would see that and be like, these people.
Yes, get 'em.
I'm taking this account away. I mean, that's cruel.
It's like shooting the medic at war. It's like, why would you do that?
But you know what? We found out why.
Yeah.
We know why they hacked us.
For the first time in my life, we were blackmailed.
That's kind of a big moment. What do you feel?
For $300. And I'm actually not borderline. I'm offended that it was only worth $300 to them. This is at least 10 grand.
I wouldn't even think about paying it unless it's over 10 grand.
Yeah. 100,000.
I'm obviously not going to pay any kind of money to a robot hacker person.
Yes.
But still, I was offended.
I was
like,
offended.
300? I wanted to write back and be like, try higher, buddy. Try higher.
100%. I wanted to be like, are we going to do like $1 a follower here? Like we got 22,000 followers, like $22,000. Like,
there you go. I would have I would have respected that.
Yes, respected that. But 300, I'm like, no, you don't even deserve this. How dare you? It is worth more than $300 to me. So, but first time in my life blackmailed. That was a very interesting moment.
So there's good news.
We're working.
There's bad news.
We are working with Instagram. It should be all worked out. Totally thought it was going to be like a 24-hour turnaround, and now we're going on 7 days. But trying not to freak out. You can send all the prayers and the good vibes, if this is what you do, to me if it gets deleted. I don't think it will. Instagram has reassured us that it's, even if you delete your account for 30 days, they save it. So, but if it gets deleted, you will need to check on where I am in my location. I might be in a church just like praying and weeping.
I've thought about if it gets deleted completely, which it probably won't. It'll probably come back. If it gets deleted completely, I'm going to like draw a circle on the sidewalk and be like, I'm not going to leave the circle until we get all our followers back. Get like some media attention, you know, kind of just like, we'll see, you know, maybe that could work.
Yeah. That sounds like a good plan.
Might get the wrong kind of followers, but you know, not people from the infertility community. Might be just like people who like want to see if I make it, if I ever leave the circle.
And you know what's so funny is I don't want that back for me. I want that back so we can help that community. I feel like it just shows that there is people out there that are struggling with this, and I just don't want to lose the opportunity to serve them. That's what I would say. And Instagram is a great tool to check in, very light, you know, content and all that kind of stuff. Well, maybe not always light, but like a way that we can like talk to them and touch people in their daily lives of how they're experiencing this.
Yeah.
And I feel like I just want it back so we can help them. Like
what I hear you saying is that you want to touch people in their daily lives.
That's what I want to do.
Instagram, give us our account back because Jessie wants to touch people in their daily lives.
Thank you for making that creepy. That is
I didn't try to make it creepy. That's what you said.
What's very sweet though is people have been Instagramming me, DMing me on my own personal email, on my own Instagram, which is so sweet. They're like, "What happened to you?" I'm like, "I don't know, this hacker." But
like we said, there's good news, there's bad news, but today we are here and we are talking about infertility and negative self-talk.
And please subscribe to this podcast because this might be the only channel that we can communicate on.
That's right. You can subscribe to it on YouTube. You can subscribe to it on Apple, on Spotify, however you want to subscribe. Join us here because this might be the number one place that you actually hear from us. So without further ado, infertility and negative self-talk.
Welcome back to the Infertility Feelings Podcast, your place to process, cry, and laugh about infertility. We are so happy to have you here, and we really hope you enjoy today's conversation.
Today, we are talking about negative self-talk. When you're dealing with infertility, how do we also deal with the fact that we're talking very negatively to ourselves? Sometimes, not all the time, but for many people, in many situations, infertility and negative self-talk go hand in hand. Have you experienced that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Period. Yes. It's really hard to stay positive and you're trapped inside your brain. Infertility makes you trapped inside your brain, and that can be a really hard, ugly place. And it can be very negative. Even though you're trying to be positive, the negative can be so much louder than the positive.
Yeah, and it's hard. It feels like there's not a ton of people to blame sometimes, you know? Normally when something goes wrong, you want to blame it on something or someone. You go through infertility and you're like, oh, whose fault is this? Kind of something you almost wonder from the very beginning of like, what did I do? Whose fault is this? Obviously, we know that it's no one's fault. And you might know that, you know, intellectually know that it's not anyone's fault, but you might sit and think, I'm such an idiot. Why did I wait too long? Why did I do this? Why did I not do this? Why didn't I look into that? And you just beat yourself up. So that's what we're talking about today, negative self-talk. So the question goes to you, Jessie. When it comes to infertility and negative self-talk, what has been your experience?
I think it's interesting because no one gives you a manual of how you should experience infertility. It's not like a driving lesson where it's like you get chances and you have to take a test and you get taught and you go to school for a really long time for it and all this kind of stuff. But then for me,
but like I know you're joking, but also I know you're not joking, but it's also very true that no one talks about it when you're growing up.
No.
It's not really a thing that even people process.
No.
When you do sex ed, they don't talk about how difficult it can be to get pregnant.
And there is a community of people that are trying to change that. Yeah. There are people that are trying to work with the government and work with schools and stuff like that to have that be something that is taught to young people, which I think would be really cool, especially in like high school, college years. I think that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Sidebar. No, I think there is no manual. I had no idea what I was doing, but then I was so mean to myself when I made a mistake. Or I felt like I did something wrong, or I listened to the wrong person, or I made a choice that I thought was right. And then I was so mean to myself. It just seems so weird and bizarre to be like, no one taught you how to do it. Like let's take a car, for example. let's take a drive in a car. Say when you are 16, your parents or whoever is teaching you how to drive doesn't show you.
Right.
They just put you in the car seat.
How young are you driving?
When you're 2. They put you in the driver's seat.
Right. Yes. Okay.
And they don't warn you how to do it. They don't give you any advice on how to do it. They just say, go. And you go. And what would you do? For me, I would probably like drive into a wall or drive into whatever, crash or not know what I'm doing or feel really insecure. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then I feel like if you made a mistake, you wouldn't feel so bad though, because you could look and be like, well, no one taught me how to do this. I have no idea what I'm doing. Please help me.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And then when you think about infertility, it's the same. No one shows you how to do it. No one gives you a manual. There's not a lot of people that talk about this. I think there's a lot of people that are experiencing infertility, but there's not a lot of people that talk about it. So you don't have anybody to talk to. And then I don't even know if I make mistakes. We just like have things go wrong or whatever. And we automatically blame ourselves. I've heard so many people say, I should have known. I'm like, no, you shouldn't have. No one taught you.
Yeah.
You learned because you made that and that wasn't the right thing to do or whatever. It didn't turn out right. So you grew and learned and moved on to something different.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's just so interesting because I feel like if you're thinking back to the car, no one would blame you. They would be like, well, no one taught you.
Right.
So that's why you made mistakes.
Yeah.
And it's like with infertility, it's the same, but we are so mean to ourselves. And we think that we are so stupid and we should have known better. And I just wish I could go back and make different choices. It's like, you didn't know. You didn't know.
Yeah.
No one has taught you. Or at least for me, no one taught me how to deal with it and do it emotionally, with doctors, physically, the shots, all that kind of stuff. That was just trial by fire. That was not like, is that how you say that? Trial by fire?
Yeah, I think so. Can I ask you a question?
I just think it's interesting.
Is that something that you realize now in hindsight, or when you were going through infertility, did it feel like no one taught me how to experience all this thing? No one taught me how to grieve and go through this process? Or is it when you're looking back, you're now realizing?
Oh, looking back.
Okay.
Then I was so mean to myself.
Yeah.
I was like, how could you? That's so stupid. Why'd you make that choice? And especially with me, I have such a complicated relationship with hope. Why'd you hope? Why'd you get so excited? And then I would just be so mean to myself of like, and it's so funny because I think we can do both and I'm going to try to explain this because it's a little bit complicated in my head, but I feel like it makes sense of like, we beat ourselves up for being hopeful, but then when it works out and we're not hopeful for a really long time, then we beat ourselves up that we should have been more excited. Like, it's just like, it's just this constant thing of like, just really judging ourselves and judging and just negative self-talk and negative things. Like, I would never talk to someone like how I talk to me.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point. And you've said this before on the podcast, and I think we should dig into it because I think it's important.
Well, here we go.
We have the time. People can see us. We're ready to go now. No, I think it is important because you've brought it up multiple times. I think there's this idea that the negative self-talk, the negativeness, the beating yourself up is never satisfied, if that makes sense. I think that's what you're trying to say. You beat yourself up for not being hopeful enough when you're waiting or something like that. Maybe your cycle is late or something like that, and you're like, "Well, maybe this could be it," or you're maybe in a treatment or you're doing some testing, you're waiting and you're thinking, stay positive, and you almost start to beat yourself up for not being positive, right? Which is negative self-talk. You're beating yourself up. But then maybe something negative does happen, and then you beat yourself up for not being positive enough or being too positive. So that's what I'm saying is I think what you're getting at is that the negative self-talk, that negativeness towards yourself is never really satisfied. You never feel like you did it right. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah. That's a better way to put it. Thank you.
Well, I've just always tried to understand what you're trying to do with that. And I get, in my mind, it makes me think, you never feel like you really did it well.
Yes.
You know?
Right.
You never talk to yourself well. It was either too positive or too negative or too this. And then when the thing happens, whether it's good or bad, you beat yourself up for the way you talked to yourself, whether it was too good or too bad. And you're kind of all spun around in this negative energy world.
Oh, and I talked to someone one time who was 8 months pregnant after years of infertility.
Yeah.
And she was beating herself up that she wasn't happy during the pregnancy.
Yeah, interesting.
She was never happy. She feels like she robbed herself of the excitement and the baby that she wasn't excited or wasn't whatever. And now she was trying to muster the happiness and muster the excitement. Yes.
Catch back up.
Catch back up. And it's like, it's just so funny. It's like a never ending cycle. And I totally think what you said too, of like, it's just like a circle of be hopeful, don't be hopeful too much. And then you're like judging yourself and just very negative, just very, very negative. I think body, I felt very negative towards that I was failing, that I'm a failure, that, if I would just do this perfectly, maybe it would have worked out. Like and I think that too, perfectionism, especially with those type A kind of people, just being perfectionist. I think being a perfectionist can have a very negative and a very dark side of like, oh, if it didn't work, oh, maybe it's if you would have done it absolutely perfect, it would have worked or whatever. And it's like, now you're negative of like, oh, I could have been more perfect. I could have been more better. And it's like, that's just infertility strips that of you. You cannot do it perfect.
I think that kind of matches onto my personality, is wanting
I wasn't going to say anything, but
I want to be perfect all the time.
Maybe you could talk about that.
No, it's true. I think that is how I experienced infertility when it comes to negative self-talk, is this idea of perfection. I just wanted to do it perfect. I'm the type of person, and I've said this before, when I go to TSA or something like that, I want to do it perfectly, you know?
You won't even stand next to me.
I don't even want to be associated with what is going on at TSA.
I'm throwing my shoes.
Here.
Half the time I forget that I have to take my shoes off. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. Thank you so much. I'm throwing my shoes everywhere. Doug is like, I don't know her.
Jess is taking her shirt off, just half naked. What do you want me to do?
Not too far from the truth.
No, I absolutely. Like, I see it coming and I'm like, okay, perfect. What are they saying? That, oh, I gotta take my computer out. And then when I do it wrong, I feel like such an idiot. It feels like someone comes on the loudspeaker and they're like, man in the blue shirt, everyone look at him. And I hate that feeling. Just want to do it well. Here's why though. And I'm going to stick up for our type A people. It's not that I have this crippling fear that I'm not enough. Maybe that's somewhere deep down there for all of us.
Okay.
But it's that I actually enjoy it. It's something, it's like part of my personality craves and loves that moment where this is how you do it and you do it perfectly and you're like, boom, I nailed it. It's a fun experience. Someone who's not type A probably doesn't get that.
Yeah.
You know?
I was just going to say, I do not understand that at all, but yes.
Like, there was part of me that loved when a test was coming up to study to perfection and to know.
You with school? Study?
Okay, there's a lot that goes into that, but I'm just saying.
I know what you mean.
Later in school, when I really kind of dove into it more and cared more, studying for something and knowing it to perfection, and then the test comes and you know it to perfection. Like, there's something so satisfying about that. You know, it almost feels like even like a simple pleasure. Going through TSA and doing it perfectly was a simple pleasure to be like, oh, it just was so efficient. I love that. You get something like infertility, or just, infertility, that's an umbrella term for all struggling to conceive. You know, like you get to that whole world and there's no way to do it perfect. That is, I think, is what drives me most insane, and where the heartbeat of my little negative self-talk would come from was, I just want to do it perfect. And then you go to the doctor and you kind of get different messages from people, or you just read forever. You know, till 2 a.m. you could read. And then the next night you could read till 2 a.m. again. And the things that you read are almost like canceling out the things that you read the night before, because the people think differently. And it's just
never ending.
So that never ending cycle presents this really impossible task for you as a type A person to do it right. And then that's where you just beat yourself up of like, well, if I just did it perfect, then it would work. Like, I don't know how to do it perfect because there's no way to get to perfect. And I only realized that in hindsight, to be honest.
When does the negative self-talk happen? Is it happening as you are being a perfectionist? Like, take the pills, write the list, do A, B, B, C? Or is it when it's the letdown and it's like, oh, my perfectness, and you know what I mean? Perfectionism.
Yeah.
No one is perfect. Someone who is a perfectionist. It's like, or is it, is it the letdown of like, it didn't work or it failed or whatever that made you have the negative self-talk? Like, when does the negative self-talk come in?
It was at the end, when things didn't work out, you know? That's when the negative self-talk just poured on. Because during, you're still in the game. You know, you're like, don't give me the chance. Like, I want the percentages. I want to know everything. Don't tell me it's good or bad yet. We're still in it. I can still optimize. I can still read. I can still try something. And then you get your period. A cycle doesn't work. Another month goes by and you're like, what did I do? How could I seriously have done it wrong? I did it perfectly. We did everything perfect. And that's where you just start to beat yourself up. It doesn't.
What does that voice say?
Yeah, to me, the voice isn't like, you're horrible. It's, you didn't do enough.
Yeah.
You got lazy.
Yeah.
There's something that you didn't figure out.
Yeah.
That is a very anxious, horrible feeling.
Yeah.
There's something you didn't read. There's something you didn't realize. There's some doctor you didn't listen to. So then you go on this journey to figure out everything. And I think that's, as a type A person, negative self-talk feels like burnout. You know, because you can't do it anymore.
Right. You have to stop.
You have to stop. Yeah.
You can't do this perfectionist thing where it's like, I'm perfect. You can't do that like cycle of like, I'm going to do this perfectly and then it's a letdown, and I'm going to do this perfectly and then it's a letdown. Like I could see that might even be a bigger drop for someone who isn't a perfectionist.
Totally.
It's like more of a letdown of like, oh, it's your fault. It's your fault. You didn't outdo it. You didn't win it. Which we talked about in our infertility and type A podcast of just like, and it's just hard because that system has probably worked for you really well in the past.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't work sometimes it doesn't work in the infertility world. Yeah.
And that's what's crazy is you're encountering something that's so fundamentally different.
Yeah.
For you, was it constant? Like,
constant.
Okay.
Anything else?
What was the voice saying?
I think mine was more judging how I was feeling.
Mm.
Judging, you shouldn't be this sad. You shouldn't be that jealous. You shouldn't be that hurt. You shouldn't be that angry. You shouldn't be that. You shouldn't be this. It's like, you shouldn't. And I think I just heard that a lot in my head of like, you shouldn't spend all this money on this. You shouldn't like do that, do this. And it just was a constant of you shouldn't do this. And it just was exhausting. And it was constantly in my head.
It sounds like you're shaming yourself, or maybe you're afraid of shame. You're afraid to be like, oh, you're guilty, shame, stuff like that.
Yeah. I definitely struggle with guilt and shame.
Yeah.
I'm in recovery. I shouldn't be guilt and shame recovery. No, I'm not even recovered of guilt and shame feelings, but I think that's when I would feel it the most, is when I feel like I let you down, or I let myself down, or we made the wrong choice, or I did something wrong, or maybe I didn't give it as much of an effort as Doug would have, because being with a type A and then being with type B, or whatever you call people that aren't type A, we need a group for those people. But I think that was hardest. Sometimes I would feel shame of like, oh, Doug probably would have done this better than me, like, or perfected it better than me, or something like that. And I think I just would walk around with guilt and shame. Like, was I doing it right? And like just beating myself up and then I think also feeling guilty that we couldn't give this to one another. Like, or I couldn't give this to you, or
I never, even just to be vulnerable, I never felt like you needed to give that to me. You know what I mean? I wasn't like, Jesse has yet to produce me an heir.
Well,
like that's never how I felt.
That's what's hilarious though about negative self-talk is it's probably not the truth.
That's actually a great point. It's fundamentally really not the truth.
And I know it. I knew that.
Yeah.
We were very committed to each other, whether we have kids or not. Like, I knew that you would love me forever, whether we had biological children or not. Like, I knew that, but it was just something that would just slowly creep in. But it wasn't true and it wasn't reality. It just was what was stuck up here. And I think for me also, I just really judged myself for like having a sad day. It's like, you should be happy. You should, why is this so hard? Why is this so sad? And it's like, you're crying on the way to work all the time. It's like, you shouldn't be. And it's like, so funny. It's like, yes, you should. Like, you're experiencing something. We were having the greatest loss of our lives, is that we couldn't have biological children. And it was really emotionally draining and emotionally hard. But I just like beat myself up of like, I'm a 7 on the Enneagram. So I don't like negative feelings. I don't like all that, even though I really try to embrace them. But it's funny, I can sit with someone better in their negative feelings than I can in my negative feelings. So that's what was harder, was I could sit with someone. I feel like some 7s would be like, I can't sit with anyone. I can't hear any sad. I can hear all the sad. It's just like, oh, now when we're going to turn it on to me, am I going to be really vulnerable? So I think I would just be like, oh, I don't want to feel those things, or just judge myself for feeling those things. And just mean. I don't think I'm very nice to myself sometimes.
What do you mean?
I think that I can have negative thoughts about my body, or thoughts of like, as a woman, you aren't doing what your womanness should be doing. Again, did someone actually tell me that? Did someone write me an email and say, Jesse, your only goal in life is to bear children? No.
Right.
It's just in there. And I think that's what's so interesting about negative self-talk, is I wonder how much of it is the truth and how much of it is lies that we tell ourselves.
I absolutely think that negative self-talk is usually lies. It's usually things that aren't true. We tell ourselves, oh, we're being so dumb for feeling the way that we're feeling, or my body can't do what my body's supposed to do. You know, I can't, like you were saying, do this for my spouse. So this
Give
person,
you an error.
I can't deliver an error. An error. That's a joke, but like we hear that all the time from people.
Okay. Correction. We do not hear air all the time. That is one family and one family alone, and they live in England. We
produced an air.
That is not true.
Yeah, okay, that's true. We don't hear that. And have we had any royal family members in our process groups?
Not yet.
I'm still waiting.
I'm still waiting. Come on.
I'm still waiting. Come on. You know?
Come on, people.
If you're listening to this.
Is there anyone that's like not
just
fertile?
DM us on Instagram.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Psych.
Oh.
Wait, we don't have an Instagram. No. Yes, we do hear that a lot. We hear all the time that, you know, I feel like I want to be able to do this for my spouse. A lot of times it's do this for my parents, help my parents become grandparents, all that kind of stuff. There is like a sense of guilt. Again, probably based in lies, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I just think that we can judge ourselves and be so mean to ourselves. And I just look back and I'm like, I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea. No one taught me, but we're so harsh and critical on ourselves. And I think that our inner voice and our negative self voice can be so much louder than our positive voice. And I think that's what it is. And almost like I picture it as like a eating away. It's like rah, 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 all that positive, all that like happy thoughts or whatever about yourself. But yeah, I just think it can be very strong, the negative voice, and whatever it is. You think you're stupid. You think you're fat. You think your body's failing. You think that you're doing it wrong. You think you're judging how you're interacting with your friendships, you know, or your relationships, or I should be happy when I'm finally pregnant and I'm not. Like, it can just constantly follow you for a really, really, really long time. And I do feel like we've learned from our process groups that some people just struggle with this in general. And when they meet in infertility, it just gets really loud and really like,
that's true.
Hard.
Yeah.
It's just some people can like really have a lot of negative self-talk that they already bring to the table.
I think it's possible that sometimes someone's entire internal dialogue is negative.
Yeah.
You know, the way they talk to themselves all the time is negative.
Yeah.
They're always beating themselves up. And
Yeah.
I think there's different levels. And we've talked about this with different psychologists that, you know, and sometimes someone has something in their past that is affecting them to such a degree that they can't break out of that negative self-talk cycle.
And infertility is a gift to be like, oh, you thought you were negative? Here it is. Here's the biggest negative Nancy ever. Yeah,
that person interacting with struggling to get pregnant is going to be a really difficult process because there's so much more fuel for the fire, almost, so to speak. But then I think other times people have, you know, they don't really think about the way they talk to themselves. They don't have a lot of thoughts and opinions about their internal dialogue. But going through infertility gives them an opportunity to think about themselves a lot more, and they think negatively about themselves.
I would say I was more that I didn't have a lot of negative self-talk or a lot of negative feelings towards myself until I met infertility. And then it was like, okay, what if I do not become I don't have a biological child? It's like, ooh, those were really negative.
Right.
A lot of fear too. I think my negative voice was just my fear talking. That's good. My negative self-talk was just my fear. It was my fear that what if we could never have biological children? What if I'll never be able to breastfeed? What if this never works? And it somehow manifested its way into just negative self-talk. Like, oh, then you would be I don't want to say my life is pointless, but like I know a lot of people that think that and struggle with that, but it's more like you'll never really amount to anything, or you'll never really truly be happy, or stuff like that. It was like more of those like narratives. It wasn't, I feel like I wasn't like, Jessie, you're the worst, which I do feel like people do struggle with that. Mine was more just that fear negative of like, your life won't amount to a lot if you can't have biological children, or you'll never truly be happy. And that was just my fear. My fear was that was going to happen.
Yeah, and you took that opportunity to just speak the fear to yourself over and over and over.
Yeah.
And then that becomes cruel.
Yes.
That becomes unkind, and that becomes negative. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
The brain is a powerful thing.
I know.
And sometimes that is the loudest voice that we have in our lives.
Yeah. I think sometimes too, we're trying to process our fear. We're trying to process what we actually are afraid of, what we're thinking. And we don't want to talk about it to anyone else. So we just talk about it to ourselves. We're afraid that we won't be able to get pregnant naturally. We're afraid that we won't be able to get pregnant through these treatments. We're afraid that all these things. And instead of telling people them, we tell ourselves them. This isn't going to work. What if this doesn't work? And you do that to a degree, it's almost unkind. It almost becomes cruel in the way that you're almost punishing yourself with the amount of negativity that you're processing on yourself.
And you would never talk to someone like you talk to yourself.
Yeah.
You would never. We just had this in our process group. This girl just was feeling so stupid for all these decisions that she made. Never had a manual. No one taught her how to do it. Never had a manual. No one taught her how to do it, but she was like beating herself up. And I told her, I said, would you talk to me like that way? Would you say those things? Say I made all those same mistakes in your mind that you felt like you made. Like, that, would you treat me that way? And it's like, of course. She was shaking her head. No, I would never treat you that way. So sometimes our voice is meaner than we would talk to anyone. Our inside negative voice is meaner than we would talk to anyone else. And that's just really not nice. I just want to like hold my little heart of like, that's just really sad. It's really sad that we have that and that we deal with that.
So infertility can cause us to speak our own fears to ourselves to a degree that we almost are beating ourselves up.
My fears manifested in negative self-talk.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
It can cause our type A personalities to go into overdrive and beat ourselves up for not researching enough, knowing enough, thinking through enough things. It can cause us to be negative about our bodies, about our partners, about life, about the future. It really is this black hole for negative self-talk. It sucks everything into itself and it almost feeds back into this really negative loop. What on earth do we do about that? How do you make it through infertility without experiencing less negative self-talk than more negative self-talk? Is there anything that we can do about it? That's the question. What do you think, Jessie?
It's a great question. I've been dying to be asked.
Really,
Thank you
everything that we're talking about leads to this moment right here. No pressure on this. No pressure on the words that you're about to say right now.
Well, for me, it is always telling someone what I'm feeling, what are the words that I keep speaking to myself. I feel like me and you have a good dialogue of like, what have you been telling yourself lately? It's like, this is what I've been telling myself. And then, so not only telling someone, but I feel like you always, especially with my guilt and shame, like I don't view you that way. I don't see you that way.
Yeah.
I don't blame you for this, that, or whatever. And that just helps me shush that negative voice down so much more, is when I put it out there to someone. But then it's putting it out there and sharing it, which does feel better. But then it's also believing the person, how they view you, which is really difficult. And I think that's hard. That it's hard to share your negative self-thoughts. Especially sometimes with your partner. I feel like you go into this role sometimes when I'm negative self-talking, that you go into like a protectiveness role. Like, I don't want you to feel that way.
That's true. Yeah.
Like, no, you're talking about somebody that I love. And sometimes I'm like, I know you love me. I know that you think I'm fabulous.
Of course. Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, yes. Yes, of course. Yeah. You're right though on that. I just want to say real quick,
yeah.
When you start to beat yourself up, I almost feel defensive for you, but it's towards you that it's a very interesting situation. Yeah.
In any other scenario, if someone was talking to me like that, that would be an appropriate response for you to be like, hey, don't talk to Jessie that way, or whatever it is. But it's like, when it's me, it's just this interesting thing that we've had to figure out in our relationship dynamic. But I feel like just sharing it with you, and then this sounds like very robotic, but I swear that it helps, saying something of the fact of like, do you agree? Or do you think that's true? Or what do you see in me? Very vulnerable thing to say. But I think that saying that's also risky and very vulnerable, but then you have to believe them. You have to believe that they're telling you the truth, that they don't see you that way. And I think that is one way for me that I can quiet down that negative voice. Like, do you blame me for not having biological children? Like, do you blame me?
No, not at all. Yeah.
Right. So I have to believe you. So first is saying it, because my negative voice is really loud, that you do. Doug does. Doug blames you. Doug doesn't. Doug wishes he could be with someone else that could have biological children. Like, it's gone to a dark place sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that saying it is step one, and then believing it is step two. And I think that's how you can quiet down anyone. Tell your mom, tell your friends, whoever you feel safe with. I think a lot of people do that in partnerships, though. That's the number one place that you do that. I would think. You don't have to, but maybe you have somebody else. But especially when it comes to infertility, because I think sometimes only the partner knows that you're struggling with that.
Yeah.
So that would be a good thing. Good place to start.
I think that's the way you set that up is brilliant. You're brilliant.
Thank you.
That's what I'm trying to say.
I've brought you here today to tell me that. Thank you.
No, it's true though. I think the way you said it is like, oh my gosh, if everyone actually just did that today, tried it out one time, it could be huge. That could be huge. I do also think you're right in the way that you broke it down and saying that being vulnerable and telling someone your negative thoughts is one thing. Believing and confirming with that person is a whole other thing.
And not joking.
Yeah.
I feel like a way that I would like trickle out my negative thoughts is I'm the worst. I've just gained so much weight. Or you're probably wishing that you married someone else. I feel like for me, it like started with a joke to be like, gauge your reaction. Like, what are you going to say? But then you didn't know that I was being serious. And that was actually something that I was really struggling with.
Or you get the same type of response that you gave. I mean,
yes,
you get the same type of comment in return. You know, if you kind of say it jokingly, you might get a jokingly response, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, if you're like, oh, I just feel like I'm the worst, I can't give you a baby. I'm like, no, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But that's not enough to combat your actual fear.
And you know what's even crazier is I probably took it a step further, saying it that way, but then expecting you to respond seriously. That is a no-win.
You're like, I'm the worst. I'm just like,
I'm the worst.
Infertility has messed me up so much. I'm like all sad all the time. And then you're like, now give me the emotional response. And I'm like, no, you're fine. You know, you're like, that's it, you know?
You think I'm fine? That's it? You think I'm fine? So true.
But I think, so that's why I think the way that you set it up is so good, is like sitting down and actually being like, this is my fear, that I feel like IVF has changed me fundamentally. And throughout this whole process, I've lost my personality. Do you think that I am permanently like done? Like, do you think differently of me now?
Am I doomed?
I need to know what you think about my personality and how I've gone through this. I'm listening now. And then that person can be like, oh my gosh, wow, this is, you're being super serious. Of course, I've changed too. This is horrible. I want to get back to the way, we used to go out and do whatever. And we'll do that again. We're just in the midst of it. And like, we're good. Then you got to believe them and go, okay, I've confirmed, whether my fears are true or not. This person's still with me and we're in it together. That emotional moment almost becomes a solution to the negative self-talk, right? You have to bring in that positive, affirming, kind talk to combat the negative self-talk.
I totally agree. Maybe it should be like a weekly negative talk check-in.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure that your partner has negative thoughts too.
Totally.
I was just going to ask you one thing. I know this is kind of a sidebar. How do you feel like your anxiety
is doing in life? Well,
no.
Well, no, what were we going to say?
Does your anxiety make your negative self-talk worse, would you say?
Good question. I would say my negative self-talk is anxiety. They're almost very much so in the same. I'm anxiously talking to myself, and that becomes negative. That kind of going back to what we were saying earlier with the type A thing, you're beating yourself up, but it looks like burnout. It looks like anxiety. I'm not necessarily saying negative things of, oh, you idiot. You're such a, like, oh, how could you do this wrong? I mean,
I think some people do.
Some people do. And maybe in my lowest moments, I'm like, oh, he's such an idiot. How did I not think of that? Mm-hmm. It's more so I'll double down. Like, yes, Captain, I'll double down. Like, oh, it didn't work. I'll double my efforts. And then you double your efforts and it doesn't work. I'll triple my efforts. And that is negative. It's just negative self-talk. Like that I've created a negative scenario for myself to exist in. It's so unkind because the expectations are so unrealistically high.
So it's like, try once with this anxiety, try twice, I'll have more anxiety, try 3 times, I'll have more anxiety.
Yeah, like when it actually passes the barrier to negative self-talk, I don't know exactly, but
Yeah.
like going from one country to another country, you don't know exactly where the line is, but at some point you're like, I am in negative self-talk land.
Yeah.
I have officially crossed over, and this is cruel what I'm trying to put myself through.
Yeah. I was just thinking about that as we were talking. I'm like, ooh, someone who struggles with anxiety, it's almost like the negative self-talk is anxiety. It's like you don't know the difference. It's like they're like kind of holding hands, and that's got to be really hard. But what would you say to people, Doug? What would you say to the peoples to combat negative self-talk, or maybe something that has worked for you?
My thought is that if you're going to combat the negative self-talk or address the negative self-talk going on in your own life, I think you have to be kind. You can't negative self-talk yourself out of being negative self-talking.
Pause. Pause. You can't. The way to get out of negative self-talk for you is not negative.
I've often thought that it is, and I've often tried to do that.
How's that going for you?
You're like, I got to stop beating myself up. Like, just stop. You idiot. Stop beating yourself up. Like, oh, you're being such an idiot. Like, you're so stupid. Just stop. Stop being. Oh my gosh, this isn't working.
I could see how that would be
But
very
you
exhausting.
almost start to beat yourself up for beating yourself up, thinking that will be a way that actually brings about change. But clearly it's not bringing about change. The negative self-talk is a problem. You can't solve that problem with just doing the problem more.
Right.
You can't double down on the problem to get yourself out of the problem.
Right.
That you're just going to put yourself in a maze that you can't get out of. For me, getting out of negative self-talk has always looked so kind and so sweet and tender and, gentle.
I was going to say, what does that look like as a guy?
That's a good question. It might even feel I guess guy or girl, it might feel foreign for you if no one's ever really been kind to you like that. And all of a sudden now you're going to be kind to yourself. The world necessarily isn't very kind all the time.
Yeah. I was just wondering what that actually looks like. What does that actually look like for you to be tender and gentle to yourself or someone?
Yeah.
Right? I'm even asking as like a guy. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like as a woman, I can like almost get into that, like, be kind, be gentle to yourself, even though sometimes I don't even believe it. But it's like I'm trying to do it. What does that look like for you?
I think for me, I'll be very tangible about it. Say, we're going through a cycle and we're waiting to hear the results. And I'm thinking about the outcome and I'm stressed about the outcome. And then maybe it's a negative outcome. Instead of automatically going, like I didn't think about it enough. I didn't research enough. We didn't do enough. Giving myself some time to just say, hey, that sucks. It's okay to not figure it out right now. It's okay to give it a day. Like, let's give it a day and feel our feelings and be sad. And then maybe then that negative self-talk bubbles up and I'm like, oh, this isn't working. Like, I'm not doing enough. And be like, hey, we told ourselves we're going to give ourselves a day. It's okay that you're feeling that, but let's just sit in this. It's okay that you're feeling that. Like, really just being that kind to yourself, giving yourself space and freedom. And instead of maybe you're researching something late at night and saying like, I got to figure it out. Stopping, maybe you have a moment of consciousness and you say, hey, it's okay to go to bed. The information will be here in the morning. It's important to get rest. You're doing a good job. Let's go to bed.
So yours is more like behavior connection.
Yeah.
Than emotional talking to yourself connection.
Yeah. It's really like being kind to ourselves with the way that we're living. For me,
That's
it was
different to me.
Yeah. For me, because going back again, like that type A thing, I've said this a couple times, but the way that I'm living becomes cruel. I'm overthinking something, allowing myself to speak kindly to myself in those moments to say, hey, you can stop. You're allowed to give yourself a break. You're allowed to go to bed. You're allowed to do it wrong. You're allowed to make mistakes. Being kind with the way that I'm living. At other times, that does cross over into maybe more of what you're thinking of classically. Instead of saying, oh, I just feel like such an idiot, then saying, no, you're not an idiot. You're trying your hardest and this is really hard. But being that kind, I think you have to be that kind to yourself, which can feel foreign and vulnerable and weird. And this is probably one thing I should note is you don't always believe it. You know, you don't always believe this positive voice. It might feel so odd for you to say, you know, you're trying your hardest and you're doing a good job. You might be like, I don't believe that at all. But if you start to speak that to yourself more, it's going to be more successful than saying, hey, you idiot, stop calling yourself an idiot. That's not going to work either, you know?
Right.
But that kindness over time starts to convince your body and your brain
Right.
that, okay, I can relax. You know, I am not an idiot. I am trying my hardest.
Right.
I'm doing my best. But that I think also is connected to your thought of if you're having a hard time doing that, and you're having a hard time finding those positive words, you got to go to other people.
Mm-hmm.
You got to go to other people because those people will give you the words that you need to repeat yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And
safe people.
It's safe people.
Don't go to your aunt that always tells you to relax. She's off limits when it comes to your negative self-talk because she's going to confirm it. I think that's what's hard too, is that you're trying so hard. Or for me, I was trying so hard to not have negative self-talks. And then I would just walk in the world and it would just be confirmed that you should think that. Confirmed. Yeah. I should be relaxing. I should be, you know, better at tracking my cycles. I should be, you know, standing on my head after sex. I should be like all those things. I think that's what's difficult too, is if you don't have anyone that is safe and all is in the world is those negative reactions, that's going to be harder to get yourself out of thinking that way even more. So you have to have some people in your life or someone, your partner or whatever, that you tell the truth to, you tell all these thoughts to, because the world's going to confirm it. I'll never forget. I know this is kind of going on a tangent, but like I will never forget someone before we adopted our son said, well, you'll never love a child as much as a bio child adopting them.
It's crazy.
Right. So that was a gift and a feed for my negative self-talk.
Right.
That was just such a gift to be like,
because in your darkest moments, that's what you're saying to yourself is like, well, I've never done an adoption. Like, do you love the kid as much as like you love your own? Like, is that
exactly? I was already in the deepest parts of my soul, already worried about that, and she just went beep, and it was just a gift to feed that part of my negative self-talk. So I was just picturing people like going out to the world, listening to this podcast, and be like, I'm gonna tell my negative self-talk. It's like it is picking and choosing the right people.
Okay,
because there's so many stupid platitudes and things that could feed your negative self-talk when you go out into the world, like relaxing, or this is your fault, or go on vacation, or, you know, you should be doing all these things, you know, you should be eating this certain way, you should taking these pills. And so I think that it has to be someone safe that doesn't give you those kind of responses.
Okay, going off of that, say that thought was running in your head like a tape, you know, what if I just don't love this child? Mm-hmm. And then someone says that and you're like, confirmed. Now it's confirming it. Now I'm freaking out even more.
Even though it's so funny, she's never adopted a child before. So it's like, why did I even listen to her?
Yeah. So here's what I think would be a perfect example is you go to someone who is a safe, loving, kind person, and then they give you better words. They say, I totally see why you would think that. And it's okay to be afraid like that. It's okay to have those fears. Fears are natural. But you know what? You're going to be great because you are a great person and you are kind and you are loving and you love many people who didn't come from your biology. And they give you these better words that, you know, I've seen lots of adoptions.
Dang, can we like write that down for a script for people? That was like amazing. I don't even know.
But you know,
I know
they give you those words and then you go, I'm going to choose to believe those words. And instead of beating yourself up that you feel that way, when you feel those fears and those things come up, you go, you know what? I talked to Angie or something like that. And she gave me these words that was like, she believes in me. She thinks I'm going to do great. And it is true that there's lots of people in my life that I love and care for deeply that aren't my biology. So I can do this and people are with me. Getting out of the negative self-talk rhythm, I think looks more like that than it looks like just, hey, just stop. You know, you're never just going to stop. It's got to be this kindness that overcomes the negative. It's got to almost combat it. However much negative there is, there's got to be more kindness.
Yes.
And soon, over time, given enough time and given enough like repetitive nature of doing it, the kindness will cover the negative. But the negative might never go away. but the positive will cover and it'll start to have a greater sense of wellness, I think.
And I think if you're looking for a quick fix to feel better about yourself, it would be telling people instead of trying to do it yourself. Because especially if you are in a really, really, really negative space, your negative talk is probably so big and your positive talk is really, really small.
Right.
But I also think it's important to note what you said. It is a choice, because I know everyone knows what that's like. 10 people could say your shirt looks great and one person says, oh no, I don't like it. And you're like, I don't like it. It's terrible. I look horrible. Like we give, I feel like we give more weight to negative.
We do.
Yeah, we give more weight. I don't know if that's because we feel like that's harder to say, so someone would tell us the truth or something.
Dr. Annie has talked about how we have a negativity bias. We are biased to negative. We're biased to bad things happening. And that really goes back to a lot of different things. But from a psychological perspective, she would say, and I think the research points to, negative things were really dangerous. Negative things hurt us, you know? If we fell off the cliff, you would die. When, you know, if you touch something that's hot, you get burnt. If, you know, people think that you're don't like you, or they think that you're annoying or lame and they stop hanging out with you, then you lose your social circle. So I think we're always kind of biased to avoiding the negative things. So that negative self-talk really it's very powerful, because you're worried about all these negative things. And then if one person confirms it, it doesn't matter if you have 25 people who are saying the opposite. You're like, I knew it, because you're kind of biased to that negative. That's why I think negative self-talk during infertility is so dangerous, needs to be talked about, needs to be podcasted about, because we need so much more positive to overcome maybe even one negative, you know?
And we need it a lot, because that negative talk is probably spoken a lot to you. So we need a lot of the positives to combat that. So if you can just do that, I mean,
I think we just do those things and then DM us on Instagram. Oh, wait a minute. Shoot.
I was wondering how many times that joke would be played at this. No, but one thing I would say is this is not easy.
Yeah.
And infertility is a gift for negative talk. And not to plug the process groups, but here I go.
Yes, please plug the process groups. They need to be plugged.
If you are struggling and listening to this podcast, you do not have one person in your life that you can think of that would be good, could be able to hold your negative thoughts and to be in conversation with you as you're working through and give you some positive feedback, our process groups are the perfect place for you, because that's exactly what we do. We put it all out there. We are vulnerable. We share all our thoughts and our feelings, and then people can speak into us and speak truth into us and safety into us of how they view us. And it's just been one of the most powerful things. I've had so many people say in the process groups, I don't know why. Hearing it from internet strangers is easier for me to digest and easier for me to believe than just my husband or my family or whatever. And I get it. Your husband and your family love you. You've had a lot of backstory with them. You've had, relationship with them for a really long time. Like, I get it. Like, I feel like sometimes I'm like with you, I'm like, well, you have to say that. And it's like, well, no, you have to choose to believe them. They wouldn't lie to you, but it is a safe space with people that completely understand to be able to share and be met in that. Yeah.
I think a place like a process group is the perfect place to combat negative self-talk.
Process groups. We just process. That's what we do.
Yeah, we need
process.
places like that. And if we can't find them in our life, we have to find them somewhere else. And Uniquely Knitted, the Infertility Feelings, podcast, all these places are places where we can get those feelings connected to. We can feel other people's emotions. We can confirm this negativity that we have. We can have people speak against it, speak positivity to us. We need that so desperately. If you're listening to this podcast, or if you're watching this podcast, please check it out. You can find it at uniquelyknitted.org, and it's probably in the show notes for all of this too.
And we are working on getting new process group leaders. So if we are booked or the wait list
more
is
are
long,
coming.
More are coming. January we should have like 18. I'm just kidding. We are adding more leaders and trying to open more groups because the need is there. That is one thing that I've realized with these process groups is the need is there. The people need it. So we are trying to get more leaders.
Jesse, I think that's a wrap on our first video podcast. How do you feel about it?
I feel great.
More to come next week.
Yes. Get ready to be with us forever like this.
And now people can actually see this move.
Hey, I want to take a minute and tell you that we have a safe place for you to process your story. Uniquely Knitted has process groups opening all the time, and you are more than welcome to join us. We would love to have you. It is a safe place to tell your story, get met in vulnerability with people that get it. So look for new groups on uniquelyknitted.org. If we don't have any new groups opening, join the waitlist and we will email you when the next group opens up.